Lord. All right, so it's time to wake up. See, wake up, smell the coffee. Delightful. I'm actually having mine again at this time of day. You have to have that afternoon pick me up. And so I'm having mine right now. I'm needing a little pick me up currently. Crazy day, crazy stuff. Hmm. So I walked into, this after just getting out of the car, with my mom telling me about a friend who, well, my aunt, somebody in the family, in their family, had committed suicide. The daughter found her, and it's like, and then we have a friend who's having crazy stuff in the hospital right now, and so it does, what we were talking about yesterday does seem like quite a relevant topic for people, that in the middle of the chaos, there's a lot of things that are that are just going on that are disruptive. And so yesterday, we talked about, in the stillness, essentially, um, finding God in the stillness, and essentially, let me find where I have my little note here. Oh yeah. So, being anchored in stillness, like, what does it mean for us to be anchored in that place of stillness and then also be in the midst of chaos and know that that chaos is actually rising, that that you're that the Lord is resetting rhythms, he's shaking things, and that he's refining, he's breaking patterns, patterns that have been long standing. And I think, that is one of the things that the Lord is really going after. He's going after the things that essentially that we can't do anything about and that they've been in play for a long time. Old patterns of relating, old patterns in relationships, old patterns in family, old patterns with addictions, everything that if financial patterns, everything that we just can't do on our own, and because they're things that have been set in motion, it's like they're strongholds, if you will, and they've got history, with us, and so anything that has history with me, isn't a good thing. The familiar is not our friend, and for the most part it's the unfamiliar territory of heaven that really is our friend. And so, we're moving in these unfamiliar rhythms of grace in a landscape that is vastly different and becoming more different as we go. And it just looks really different, and we're functioning really differently in this landscape. And so, um when you're making any kind of crossover like that, it really is a challenge because all of my current sensibilities get challenged, if that makes sense. I'm used to doing things a certain way. I'm used to thinking about things a certain way. I'm used to approaching God in certain ways. I'm used to ways of functioning spiritually. I'm used to ways of getting things done in a certain way. We're used to a lot of things, and all of our used to is God's doing things out of order, out of sync. He's breaking patterns, he's breaking familiar rhythms, and he's doing things, when I say out of order, that's a good thing. We're used to step, A, B, C, D, and E, and he wants to go from A to E, or maybe he wants to start with E. And so either way, it's very disorienting. And so, like I was starting off today with, going back to a little bit of yesterday, where just the chaos seems to be increasing. Things seem to be moving the wrong direction for a lot of things, in your life. You're looking around and you're like, okay, that's not supposed to be happening. But then you'll see this place over here. Well, this is moving in the right direction. There's something going on. It's like in the middle of the chaos, the Lord is dropping little, nuggets of things that are just like testimonial things. Like something happens that just like, okay, like crazy. Um, I can tell this part of the story. So I had lunch with somebody that was new to me, and very fun lunch. And we're just talking dreams. We're just talking, share your story, my story, your story. And I mentioned that I was I had basically okay, so part of one of the things that I had gotten onto, like everything's kind of like resources get revealed as you go. And I was telling the story about how Jane and I got up here and how intentional it was in terms of I remember at one point I had this encounter with some friends in Gainesville, Florida, and we were most of my encounters that are heavenly, I'm basically trying to work out my issues with Jesus on the spot. So I see Jesus over here looking at a map, and I don't want to go over there. I don't even know why I don't want to go over there. I just like it's because when you've had a lot of disappointment and you've had a lot of disillusionment and you've had a lot of things go the wrong way, then anything that feels uber directional, at least for me, it's like I have I don't wanna say a shyness towards it, but kind of maybe the right word would be a little bit of callousness towards it, kinda like, I don't y I don't know if I'll get a straight word from you. I don't know if I'll get a directional word from you, Jesus. Like, in other words, and it's like I was telling this person today, I said, a couple of the places that have been the most challenging for me in my life have been, favor, understanding what favor looks like and feeling like I had any and desires of my heart. All of those are things that have to do with trauma. Okay. And so, and not necessarily knowing, like, I know that I've had great favor in my life, right? I've seen it in the school system when I was a teacher. We wrote a book about the favor of God that was going crazy stuff, getting kids getting healed. And I mean, just crazy stuff. And so I know that it exists and everything is perception. Okay. So my perceptions of favor have maybe been a little bit skewed because I want them to look a certain way or I have an investment in something. And so in this encounter, the Lord was looking at a map and we were in Gainesville. We hadn't come up here yet. And he said, I went over to the map and he said, you've thought about Nashville proper and Atlanta proper, meaning, just Atlanta. And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right," as a place to go, because we were at a spot where we prayed into a transition to go from Brunswick to where we are now for 5 years. And so after our son Rodney, who was my 10th grade student that we adopted, after he went to college and all of that was done, we were like, "Okay, we it's time for us to go on." And so during that time, I went back and feverishly did my second doctoral program. I like to do as many as I can. So the version of that was we'd been in education for a long time after coming out of ministry. My wife and I both, were the love of my life 27 years ago. We were coming out of ministry when we married. Going into education, it was the way to make a living and pay child support, praise God. And Um, so we immersed ourselves. I mean, we, we were probably in school the whole time we were teaching in Florida. You're going back for the master's. I was in a doctoral program back then. It was a 66-hour program. I had completed 60 hours. I had 6 hours left, which was just the dissertation. But I was in a school and I couldn't do the project that, back then it was to make it real simple and kind of boring, which is what it was, reading program A versus reading program B. Well, I was a principal and the school was like undone. I was coming in to clean up a lot of things. And there wasn't really a way for me to do reading program A, reading program B. So I just let it go. And so that was a terminal program. So I went back a few years and I said, can you give me an EDS? Because I'm not going to do this thing. And they did. So that was nice because that was a little pay bump and, It was in between the master's and the doctorate. And so when we took our son to college, I remember sitting there and we had the parent meeting, and he went to Olivet Nazarene University. And I didn't know a thing about football. He's my son's African American. He's big guy, and he was a football player, and we knew that that was part of his future. Well, I had an app on my phone. I mean, I went to all the games, and everything in high school, and I would use my app to figure out what the positions were, and I was learning. I was trying to do my best. I grew up as the super uncoordinated kid who never played a sport in his life except once, and it was traumatic. And at any rate, learning as much as I could. And so when it came to him being recruited, I was like, okay, let me just check out. Let's look at some Christian colleges. And so what I would do is I would take an email and I would fashion it where I was basically saying to the coaches, I have two goals here. I want to get our school, Glen Academy, on your recruiting map because obviously Christian schools don't really recruit here much, which they should. And I want you to take a look at our son's film. And I would send it to every position coach. Now, as much as I didn't know about football, I am smart enough to know that as a DN, he wasn't, you know, not every position coach was going to be interested in his film, but I had a method behind my madness. I'm going to bombard them all. And so ultimately we had people that the coaches started tracking us down. And it came down to four schools. And so there were four schools that wanted him. Were interested. Now he hadn't quite met the criteria yet either. For NAIA, which is equivalent to D2, you had to have a C average, which he did. You had to have an 18 on the ACT, which he did not yet. And you had to have be in the 51st percentile of your class. So I mean, he met two of them. You had to meet two or three of those, I believe. And so anyway, the thing that he needed was the ACT. So the day he took it, it takes a couple weeks for the results to come out. He didn't know that they were out yet. I already been online and I saw that he made a 20. His mom had gone over basically calculator functions and basic math equations the night before. And he bumped him 5 points in the math on the ACT. And so I got a football delivered to the school. I ran the football over to his class before the class dismissed. And on the football, I had written, "Hey, Corn, how are you?" I had written ACT plus 20 equals ONU. And so I put the football on his desk, and that's how he knew that he passed the ACT. So my prayer at the time when he only had a 17 was the school that basically offers him, enrolls him, and offers him and gives him an offer for football. While he still has the 17 and has not met the criteria yet, that's the door we'll go through. So one day on my way to Starbucks, which is always Jesus, right? Praise the Lord. Um, I get a phone call, and it's the coach from Olivet Nazarene University. He's like, I got good news and good news. We've accepted Rodney to the university and we have an offer for him. So, my second prayer along those lines was that he would take people with him and that he would be the first one to go to get offered. So, we went up at Thanksgiving. He got his offer and he ended up taking one of his good friends, and the university actually paid for everything for that one friend. Not for Rodney. You're funded about 70% of your tuition with the NAIA, and he was the highest paid kid on the team actually, for as far as how much scholarship. And so the other kid that paid for everything, which was beautiful. Um, so why was I telling you about all the Rodney story? Dun, dun, dun. Oh, where was I going? So, what was I telling? It was about our transition. At any rate, so Rodney went to Olivet Nazarene University. I didn't have a clue about how to get anybody recruited, but he did. He got recruited. By that time it was all over, he was interviewing coaches. and asking them questions about the spiritual climate of their schools. And so that was a pretty phenomenal thing. He got to go to school, and that was great. So our trans so w oh, I know why I was telling that. So once he went to school and he was already through, like, he didn't finish this degree because he met the girl who he's now married to, and they have our 6-month-old, little over 6 months, baby Cyrus, and so they live near Nashville. And at any rate, so once he was there, we were like, "Well, okay, now we need to get out of Brunswick." And so I did we just want so we had prayed into this. I know where I was going. So I thought that I was going to be when we went to take him to Olivet. Now I'm back on track. I sat in the parents' meeting and I listened to all these professors and all the things they did with these students. And, they went on the mission trips with them. They were over their houses in college, and this the relationship they built with these kids. And I'm like, that's what I do. That's what I do. And I felt like the Lord was telling me to go ahead and get my degree. And so at the time, I remember not long before my parents had asked the question, if you ever wanted to get your doctorate, we would pay for it. So I explored all the programs that were out there that had you write your dissertation along the way. And I ended up at Trevecca Nazarene University in Nashville. And so I did that and I was done in 2018. And we were ready to make a transition. So I kept thinking, I'm gonna get hired at university and the next, and then we're gonna go to move to wherever that location is at this Christian university, and that's where we would be. Well, it never happened. I did some adjunct stuff, but I never landed that job. And so I was like, Lord, what did I do all that for? I still don't know fully. But so I was talking about our transition here. So essentially, once he went to school, we were like, okay, it's time, we need to go on, and so we knew at the time that I felt like I was very confident that wherever we were going to land, it was going to be about the location and getting into the region more than it was the job. So back to that encounter at the with Jesus with our friends in Gainesville before we came up here. So Jesus is looking at this map and he says, "You've thought about Nashville, which we had. We thought about Atlanta, which we had." And he said, "I have leased of these places all over the place that I'm going to blow up as creative hubs." And so I knew then that we were going to come to a least of these place. And so I just thought that was so cool because it's always about the least of these. It's always about the last going first. The first shall be, the last shall be first. The first shall be last. It's like the least of these are going to lead the brigade. And if you're a least of these, raise your hand, right? So we we come up here. The whole thing was about the job. The job that was here was basically one that was in Lawrenceville, which is we're in the northeast Georgia. Um, Not totally North Georgia yet, but we're about an hour and a half away from mountains. And so we could get there pretty quickly, need be. And which the need be needs to be even more so. Um, at any rate, so when we're coming up here, we had the hardest time at first, like, the whole house thing. I ended up coming up 3 months early. I don't know why I'm talking so much about transitions, probably because people are in the middle of some right now. Um, I did my dad's funeral on a Friday and I got the job up here on a Monday. And that's just how the transition went. So I was up here for 3 months before my wife actually got here. And then when the time came, we closed on that house down there in Brunswick and on the 5th of March and closed on this one on the 7th of March. And so when the transition happens, it happened really fast. Some of you guys are going to be in for some fast transitions. And this is not the first transition. I mean, we're not moving. What I'm saying is there are more fast transitions coming. And so when I landed the job and I was up here and we were trying to get a home, and I mean, I was telling this story at lunch. I think that's why I'm on it. And we went through two homes that were cash offer last minute, the realtors go MIA at the last minute, and I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And the one that we landed on, I fell in love with. It had all the nice upgrades. It was just really nice. It was in a, nice neighborhood, 0 lot line. You could spit on your neighbor. That would probably be the bad part. And, but I love the house. And we're looking at houses long distance. I'm here, but Jane's in, Brunswick. We're doing it on a FaceTime. So, at any rate, um, we didn't get that one last minute. I went to bed. I was staying with people in Gainesville, Georgia, and I would drive to Lawrenceville from Gainesville, from Lawrenceville to Winder, Georgia, or one of these areas here to look at houses on my way home from work and then go to Gainesville. It was quite a trip. And so we're here, and the last one, I get up the next morning. I'm driving from Gainesville. I'm going to Lawrenceville, and I cried that night with that we lost that other house. I was like, "Lord, come on?" And he said, "Look, if you have the right house in the wrong location, what good is it?" Because I woke up feeling full of possibility. I felt and I thought, "Scott, you don't transition emotionally this quickly." And I knew this was to be the Lord. And so that's when he let me know. And so I think Jane found this area, this development online. I came over here and I could walk through all the models because they were all being built. And so I chose, this one. And so anyway, that's how we got into this home. And so it's just crazy because it all happened, like I said, very quickly. But once I knew that it was the Lord's thing, that this was his, I fell in love with it. I love the layout. I love the plan. I wish it had more upgrades, which we could do in time. But everything about else about it, and our neighbors are phenomenal. Like we've never been in, a neighborhood, honestly, where the neighbors I've had them over for dinner, like where it's like you get to know your neighbors, they're here for Jane when they're here for our dog, when we want to do a trip or do something. And so we've never had any of that. And so this new landscape has a lot of things that are about it that are very different. Number one is community. Jesus is going to bring you into your tribe. And so I mean, it's been, a year, 18 months. It's been slow going on our front. If you've had that tribe hunger for a long time, then you know what I'm talking about. That sense of community, that sense of being connected to people. And, this town, on the business front was hard to break into, and I wasn't able to break into it on the front end. The business is still existing, but here it is. Right. So, my point in all that is that Jesus is bringing people into their tribe, and when you're with the right people at the right time in the right location, there's a synergy that that takes place that that's unbelievable, right? It's magnetic. It's like there's craziness going on. And what the Lord said to us when we were having that encounter around the with the map of Jesus, he said, "You guys are kingdom strategists." And he said, basically, where I'm sending you, there are things there that are waiting for you to show up to be done. And I know that. When I met with the mayor, the one thing about me is I don't do protocols real well. I mean, if I have to, I will. But I mean, generally speaking, I'm not wired for protocol. I'm wired for relationship and wired for kingdom and wired for getting things, seeing something happen. And so this is the town, by the way. Winder is the notorious home of Billy Sunday, or Billy, is it Bert Sunday? There's two Billy Sundays. One's a good guy and one's a bad guy. And this one is the home of the notorious killer, the Dixie Mafia. It's the one that In the Red Clay podcast is all about. And when I first got here, I remember going over to the corner bookstore, which sadly is not there anymore. And I walked in to Tom and I said, "Tell me about the Dixie Mafia." And he began to tell me the story because In the Red Clay talks about how this guy who was basically a movie scout coming over here to look for places to shoot stuff, um, not literally, um, happened to go into, the bookstore and began to hear about and then Tom told him the story of the Dixie Mafia. And when I remember talking to Tom and I said, you know, is this something that the town would rather I was trying to figure the town out, would rather see go away, And he said, "Yeah, pretty much." And so when I met one of my best friends here, Jeremy, he's a pastor, a local pastor. And Jane had sent him a text, email in my name because he was a pastor and I was trying to connect with people and she was just doing it to kind of get that ball rolling. And he had already been through so much, like so much turmoil was going on. First time I met him, we were in one of my favorite restaurants downtown, Le Gabrielle's, and I had just come from the coffee shop. There's not a better day than if you could go to Night Sky Coffee and then go straight over to Gabrielle's to eat your breakfast. This is perfect, perfect morning. And I had watched as I came out of the coffee shop, the entire police department of Winder was right across the street, and they all took off like fast as they could go all at one time. And of course, being as smart as I am, ha ha ha, I looked at that and I said, "That's not good. Not good when the whole police department takes off." So I'm sitting down with Jeremy, our first meeting. We're talking about revival. Oh, rabba shitara. And mm, we're talking about revival. Trying to, hmm, we're we're talking about revival, and we're both passionate about revival, men's ministry stuff, and all this stuff we're talking about, but primarily revival. And he starts to get the text: one dead, two dead. It was the school shooting that is also here, part of Winder community. So when I met with Mayor Terrell, who was actually around during the days of Billy Burt Sunday, and actually arrested his son, Sonny. He was part of the law enforcement, back in the 70s when all this was breaking out. I said, here's one thing I know. Let me tell us one other part. When I was trying to buy the business that I was buying that I didn't, I met with this attorney. He had been in Winder for 50 years. And um, so we're talking, and all I wanted him to do was to read the contract that I would purchase agreement that I was signing and for the business that I was attempting to buy at the time. And, we're talking, and I said, so he started telling me, he said, I was just a country lawyer, and I don't know how I ended up in Winder. He said, but Winder, let me get the accent right. Winder is the center of the universe. Now he's a believer. We talked about kingdom. I talked about kingdom and kids, things I'd seen happen with kids and whatever, whatever. And he couldn't actually advise me on the contract because he was friends with the person that I was trying to buy the business from. But he went through and said, well, if it has this, 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 and this, it's probably good, which made me think, okay, you probably wrote it. But anyway, when he said that, I knew what he meant, and I told him that. I said, "What you're saying is that this place has been highlighted by heaven. It's a least of these places that's been highlighted by heaven." And he agreed. So by the time I left, I mean, he was crying, we were hugging, etc. So I love these older statesmen. They're just really cool. And so and Mayor Terrell's, in his 80s. I'm sure he's like at least 80. So when I sat down with him, I said, here's two things I know. In a city that has been marked by having one of the most notorious killers, and then by a school shooting that, the whole nation knows about, and the community is still going through all of the grief and all of the aftermath that goes with that territory. I said, "What that tells me is this: this city is marked for revival." And so there are least of these places all over the globe, all over this country that God is doing something in. He's going after things that are unusual, that don't make sense, with people that it doesn't make sense with locations that it doesn't make sense with. And so he's putting you into tribe and community that doesn't make sense either. Like, how do we get among these people? Finally, here we are. And I'm saying this to say there's been a progression, okay? My big disillusionment was moving to the area knowing that we had crossed a major threshold, okay? It was the biggest threshold. We prayed into this for 5 years. And then having all hell break loose once we got here was extremely disillusioning. And I've been openly talked about my summer of, basically kind of suicidal depression for the most part, and how the enemy had gotten me wrapped up in fear. And I was convinced that, my destiny, everything. I would say to God things like, "You made the wrong person. You just made the wrong person because you put something in me. If you wanted me to be satisfied, nothing wrong with this job that I'm going to list. But if you wanted me to be Mr. IBM who goes to work, does his 9 to 5, does the 40, 40, 40, 40 hours a week, 40 years for the $40 watch at the end, and just there's nothing wrong with that life, but it wasn't what I was created for. It wasn't what was in me. I'm wanting to produce film. I'm wanting to do things that create awakening in the culture through media, and I have all these other things inside, and writing and all of it. And so, why did you I'd be like, "Why did you make me?" Like, what for? If you weren't gonna fulfill it. And I'm the same guy that would say, there's a prayer that I prayed over every student and every person, honestly, that I get in touch that I can lay my hands on. It's the Psalm 139. Oh, by the way, we will end with Jabez day 3 today. Um, it's the Psalm 139. Lord, open the book of life in them and download some chapters that are coming up that are destiny chapters, that they would know without a shadow of a doubt what they were created for, why they were on the planet. And I just pray that and release that over all of us, that you will know that you know what you were created for, why you are on the planet. And if you get the why and you know what your design is about, which is your identity. If your identity is solid in knowing who you are and why you're here, what my purpose is, everything else will flow from that purpose. Then it's just a matter of finding the thing that God is on and doing that. And so, and it's like that other encounter I had in the library of heaven where my book had all these paths and these roads were intertwining. And the Jesus said, get on the path and the dream will find you. That's the thing I say all the time to people. Just get on the path. Do the thing that God is on, the thing that probably will not make sense. You've had this desire to start something over here, or you have this entrepreneurial. By the way, we're in the biggest entrepreneurial age that the world has ever known. That there is a there are blueprints from heaven being released for entrepreneurial stuff all the time. And it's like one of the things that the big C word, COVID word did was it launched an entrepreneurial generation that we will never see the likes of in the same way again. Because people in their having their freedoms taken away from them and having being the onslaught of an enemy diabolic plan come against them to destroy them literally, came out of that and said, "You know what? I want my life back. I want my time back. I want it all back." And so now you have people wanting to start things and get into things. And that's what I did when I first came here. I was like, okay, Lord, what kind of business? Like, what can we do? How can we get engaged in kingdom stuff? The good news is that everything is kingdom. Everything you do is kingdom, okay? Whether you're washing your dishes or whether you're feeding the homeless, you're still it's all kingdom. We've had this compartmentalized thing with the sacred, the sacred and the unholy, and the what's ministry and what's life and what's this, and we put everything in these cute little boxes, and it's not. It's a big fat open box. It's all kingdom. And so, and that does lend itself to what God is doing with manifest sons and daughters of God. We're not boxing kingdom up in the church. We're actually unleashing it in through outside of all of the above. And so it makes the landscape radically different. And so we're in this landscape where many of us are being repurposed, right? Your core DNA is the same, but you're doing something that you've never done before. You feel like an imposter. You feel like, what am I doing? Or you're having something bubble up in you that you want to try that you've never done. And you've had this idea, this thing that's in you. Do the thing that is in you. Just do the thing that's in you. Let the dream track you down. A lot of what happened post C word is people got paralyzed. They were stuck. Okay. And like rightly so. Like, what do we do? I'm so disoriented. I'm so discombobulated. I've been so caught off guard and traumatized in so many ways through all of this. I don't know what to do. And so this is where your union with Jesus comes in. If it's in you, it is him. If it's in you, it is him. The only little caveat that I would add to that would be if it's to kill, steal, or destroy, then probably not him. But let's just be real. If you're one with Jesus, the things that you muse on, the things that you ponder on, the things that are trickling up in your spirit, those are Jesus. You don't have to you don't have to overthink it. You just have to do it, right? If you've been thinking about writing a book, if you've been thinking about starting something in your neighborhood, if you've been thinking about doing this as an online business, if you've been thinking about whatever it is, just do it. You do it and let God direct your steps as you move, because it's when we're moving that we have our steps directed. Part of what paralysis looks like is I'm waiting on God to speak. Well, he's always speaking. And essentially, let me see what this is. Repurpose for the kid. Oh, good. You're okay. I was just reading that, Connie. Um, he's always speaking. Him not speaking is a perception, and it's a religious one. I hate to say. There's no brass heavens. There's no wilderness. There's no those are perceptions that we have out of our unhealed self that is bent into religion because we're still trying to get something right. And so, out of that get it rightness, we think we're wrongness. And so, if you're always trying to get it right, if you're always trying to qualify, that means you always feel wrong when when you feel like something's amiss or you think you can't hear. All of that is hogwash. Can you say hogwash? Total bull hogwash. It's perception, and it's an unhealed perception, rooted in shame, probably founded in trauma, and linked to religion and death and the law, because it's rooted in wanting to get it right. So when I feel like I'm not getting it right, I treat my father in heaven like a dysfunctional dad that I have to make my way back into his presence again. He's not dysfunctional. I don't have to find out if he's in a good mood and eke my way back into his presence. It's not like dysfunctional family where we blow up and walk away and then we try to figure out when it's safe again. He is always speaking. He is never withholding from us. That's an orphan, right? That's an orphan with the big fat poverty spirit. God is withholding. most of what it is stepping into the limitlessness of God and accessing everything that's in the kingdom, the biggest barrier is us. And by that, I don't mean, oh, it's your sin problem, it's your this problem. No, the barrier simply is my perception is skewed by what my heart has come to believe that is a lie that agrees with my shame, that the enemy is empowering because he loves shame, because shame creates the illusion of separation, and there is no separation with one that I am one with. John 17, I am one with him. How can I ever be separated? How can he not be speaking? How could I not be hearing him? Everything you ever need is inside of you already. The totality of the kingdom, everything, Jacob's ladder, the revival, the shift, the all of it's all there. It's all right there. He never stops speaking, ever. He doesn't turn away. He's not distracted because I'm distracted. He's not been out of shape with me. He's not holding something off from me until I get something right. Those are all dysfunctional views of who God is. And they're all things that the enemy wants to fuel and use to create this illusion of separation. As long as the enemy can have you trying to work your way back to God, then you'll just be that much longer in a place where you don't know who you are. When you know who you are, I'm made for this. This is what I'm made for. This is what I do, right? This is the thing that's in me. When I'm being who I am, when I'm being myself, when I'm doing the thing that just seems like it's just what I do because it's me, then that's the thing that he is. That's you. That's your true self. That's your authentic self. It's the false self that wars against us. The false self is immersed in shame, thinks it's defective, thinks it's unlovable, thinks it's unwantable, and all of every other audible you could think of, right? The false self is the self that the enemy likes to highlight the voice of. If what's inside of you is telling you something negative and not true and not full of love, not full of comfort, not full of joy, not full of hope, it's the devil. I like People like to say, and I've liked to say, well, it's just me. I'm my own worst enemy. Well, yes, but it's the devil doing the talking, and the devil's trying to play on something. John Wimber said this, where there is he was the leader of the Vineyard Movement. I loved him. He said, demons are like flies. Where there's no poop, there's no fly. So in other words, the enemy only uses a place that there's access, which is usually a trauma or a wound. Okay. Or a malignant kind of sense of, let's say self-contempt. If I'm embroiled in self-contempt, and self-contempt is one of the big boulders in the soil of my heart. Go to the parable of the sower, 30, 60, 100-fold. Well, if the boulders in my soil of my heart are self-contempt, unforgiveness, or whatever you want to put in there, right? Then when God's trying to say something to me, it goes into that soil, but it gets turned and twisted a little bit. It never fully comes out, or maybe it only comes out in 30% of the time. 30% of the time, what I'm hearing come out of that soil as it goes in the soil comes out good. But this other 70% of the time, it's got lie attached to it because the boulder in the soil is doing something to displace the soil's capacity to produce 100% of truth. So Jesus is removing pebbles and boulders out of our soil all the time. Why? So that he can say something into my heart I can be fully aware that he's present, and my awareness can be turned up in such a way that I do not ever believe that he's apart from me for a moment, that our communion is perpetual, present, continuous, always. So I can trust what's inside of me. Religion says, don't trust it, don't trust it, or go get permission. Really? From who? Um, Mr. Deacon, Mr. Pastor. I don't want to be unkind, but you don't need permission. You have a high priest. Jesus is your covering, and you may not have everybody that thinks what you is in your heart is great or good. But my prayer is that God's going to connect you to people who actually do, inside or outside the church, or both. And so sometimes the thing that's in us is something that doesn't jive. Most of the stuff that God's wanting to birth in the kingdom is not going to jive in any religious environment. It's just not. Because the things that he's doing are so far outside the box. They look so different. The way he's providing is different. The way he's orchestrating is different. The way he's having us do what we do is different. The order of operations is different. So when all those things are different, it's not making sense because he's training us to be able to reign in the middle of chaos. He's training us to be able to govern this place that we're in, even in transition, so that we're governing in the stillness while the chaos and the disruption go on around us, because the unseen real is more real than what we're looking at. That's why revelation is how we function. It's how we do what we do. That's how you end up in real time. Real time is when revelation comes. I'm engaging with heaven, right? And I'm engaging and getting revelation. And when I'm getting revelation, I'm speaking and saying the things that I'm receiving. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to begin to see those things manifest because they're in real time, which is one of the big markers between the previous season or decade. I don't know what you want to call it. We're in between two. I always lose the word for this, ages of the church, right? We're in this one age is marked by hierarchy, fivefold ministry emphasis, etc. This one is manifest sons and daughters of God. You carry it all, your union with Jesus, and these two things are overlapping. And so we're learning to how to function in something new while we're still in between the new and something that's old, where the things that are first are going last, the last are going first, and the least of these are coming to the front. That's the way kingdom is functioning. It's functioning in the unfamiliar, the unsuspected, the unapproved of. It's going to be carried by people that people think are crazy. They're going to think you're crazy, and that's okay. The divide between what I would call kingdom people and religious people is only going to get wider. We're going to look stupider and crazier as we go. The things of the spirit don't usually make sense, and they confound us. That was the conversation. If you have to do it the chosen version with Nicodemus and Jesus, right? So you know about the wind, where it goes, but you don't know where it comes from. You don't know what direction it just went. You don't know what it looks like today, how it's blowing tomorrow. It could change everything tomorrow. And so, what he's wanting to get us into the place of doing is, number one, living from revelation with our own access from heaven, but also being able to live, move, and have our being in him, which means I can be okay with an unscripted life. I don't have to have a script. I just have to do the thing that I know that he's on and let him bring all the pieces together. And so if you do what he's on and you're willing to live in the realm of the unfamiliar, because The way he wants to restore what was lost is not by giving it all back to you, but by creating something new that's never been done before and bringing all of the resource and recompense into the thing that is new. So he's taking something that was lost, and his way of returning it to us is going to be in the creation of something we've never seen before. It's the participation and the engagement with the new. I'm gonna take what you lost and I'm gonna make it a stream in the desert. Because most of us don't want what we lost back tit for tat. What we want is we want kingdom, right? So we're going to I'm going to give you back what you lost. I'm gonna restore the years the locusts have eaten by creating a stream in the desert that you will be standing in the middle of and even forerunning in that stream so that you're doing something that has not been done yet. So, what are the greater works? The greater works aren't more of the same. The greater works are things that haven't been seen. So much so that the newspaper is going to have to report on what kind of miraculous things are happening in the earth. I'm waiting on those days. Well, we have nothing to report today, but there is some very unusual things happening in this state over here, right? Oh, Jabez. All right, so let me wrap with this. So sorry. Um, God is bringing you into your community. You're going to find your tribe. They're not going to be the tribe that you're used to. And God is probably pulling a lot of people away from and out of places of relationship because they can't really go with you in this season. The season change demands that a lot of things get changed, right? So my ways of doing, being, and all of it are really shifting and moving in so many ways, and it feels extremely disconcerting. But I guarantee you that you are rising in the middle of the chaos, and in the stillness you will find your anchor. And as long as you have yourself anchored in the stillness of God, then whatever's going on around us isn't going to take us and shake us. Everything will be shaking and, everything's shaking, but we're not shaken. There's a song in there somewhere. All right, so day 3, Jabez summoned the specific aid of the God of Israel in response to a critical need. Bless me indeed. Personally bend to bestow your favor upon me as I humble myself at your feet. Totally immerse me in what you want me to do, what you want to do in me, through me, and around me for your glory. Honor my humble dependence on your sufficiency. Enlarge my borders. Give me the fullness of everything that you've put under my care and make it what you have in mind. I like that. I want no more mediocre expectations and comfortable assumptions. Be with me. I want to display the markers of your ownership because I am totally dependent on you, walking with you by faith. He's coming to do the thing that you cannot. And that's what makes you a walking miracle, sign, and wonder. I surrender all my desires to live by sight, the security of the familiar, etc., in exchange for your unlimited opportunity. Keep evil. I like that. I'll take the unfamiliar and the unlimited opportunity. Keep evil far from me. Fulfill your already accomplished victories. Preserve me from every malignant intent and assignment that the adversary may cause me to worry, have offense, anger, affliction, discomfort, anguish, or dispeace. God leans out of heaven to hear and answer this kind of prayer. I like this part, the way he ends it. Much of what's happening with warfare is God doing what you cannot. And the warfare, one of the things that he's beating, if you will, victoriously in with the warfare is breaking the patterns and the rhythms of the world and the patterns and the rhythms of your life that haven't worked. The things that you've been stuck in for a long time in any realm of your life. And so he's coming to obliterate the pattern, to obliterate the rhythms of failure, the patterns of failure, the patterns of financial loss, the patterns of whatever you want to say, family turmoil. So he's going after the root. He's going after the thing that has fueled the pattern. The pattern only has the kind of life that it does because of the deep roots that it has. It has to have deep roots in order to be something that can be generationally perpetrated. So he's pulling things up by the root and breaking the patterns and breaking the rhythms of the enemy in our lives by taking the thing that is actually that it's been rooted in and pulling it up and out of the ground. It's going into the cross where it's going to remain. And so that's how he's bringing about kairos change, exponential quantum change, acceleration, all of those things. It's how it happens. It's how we come into this part of the verse in Amos 9 and the message that I repeated yesterday. Things are going to happen so fast, your head will swim. One thing fast on the heels of the other. When you're in a sowing heavy season where the reaping has not caught up with the massive sowing that has been done through every age of the church to this point, and it's like this culmination of all things, right? Things are going to happen so fast your head will spin. One thing fast on the heels of the other. You won't be able to keep up. That's how a woman who has a child, y'all know this one, right? The joy that comes after the pain is so large that the joy is the part that you remember, and then you can't keep up. You spend the rest of your life trying to keep up with that child. So you won't be able to keep up. It's gonna be like the captives coming out of Zion, but they're gonna be having so much stuff, they're gonna be doing drunken awe and wonder, and there's going to have so many things that are going to be manifesting in the season as part of the reaping of the season, as part of being the 1149 er coming in and reaping something that we didn't even sow into. We get the great privilege of being in this kind of series. That's right, we will run and not be weary because it will come with the same kind of ease that comes in the glory of heaven. As Isaiah 60 is fulfilled, present, continuous, the glory of the Lord being released in the earth, right? And the righteous standard being raised in the earth, when glory infuses the earth in any place that it touches, there is an ease and things, mountains move, things shake, things quake, and things move that were previously not movable. That's what I think will be one of the biggest hallmarks of revival. Everything will be happening at once. Everywhere you look, blessings, blessings like wine pouring off the mountains and hills. I'll make everything right again for my people, Israel. They'll rebuild their ruined cities. Get ready. They'll plant vineyards. I really want a vineyard. I really want land. Land. I want that retreat that in the North Georgia mountains, Lord, that we will own, and it'll be a retreat center. It'll have a vineyard as well. They'll work their gardens and they will eat fresh vegetables. I'll plant them and they'll be on their land. They'll never again be uprooted from the land I've given them. Oh, that one testimony that I started the thing off with. This person that I was having lunch with today, I'm trying to raise $5,000. It's on my um It's on my 501(c)(3) page, and it's for film school for me to get my certificate in film and television production at the Georgia Film Academy, and, essentially, he before our conversation was over, he's like, "Count me in for 1,000." So now we're down to 4. Alright, that's the testimony. I mean, be expecting that you're going to run into blessing and be interrupted by it. Get ready to be interrupted by blessing because he's releasing the tokens of what this landscape is all about. And so get ready for ease and blessing popping out in places and smacking us right smack dab in the middle of everything. Um, when we're not expecting it. We're going to have lots of surprises. All right. Blessings, guys.